So what this presentation is going to do is I'm hopeful it at least spurs your thoughts about how can you leverage VI Analyzer, the plugin architecture that it already is, to assist in dynamic validation of your own personal generation of professional code. All right, and so I've picked an example of this, and we'll walk through it real quick, but mostly what I'm interested in is getting your thoughts about ways of dynamically assisting, creating utilities that dynamically assist yourself. If you already have those types of utilities, I want to hear about those. Again, I'll have an example of that, but I'm really looking for feedback from you guys as to are there tools that you're already using that help you in your code generation? And then is there a way that we can leverage VI Analyzer or other tools to dynamically verify that what you're presenting at the end is up to a standard that you've set for yourself or for your team? Okay? So that's the gist of what I'm going to be talking about. I call it bookending. I don't know if that's a proper scientific software guy's term for it. Actually not a software guy myself, although I've been doing it since '97. I have to admit at the CLA Summit that I'm actually professionally elementary educator. So taught second grade, and it's actually worked out well working with the engineers at Sandia. So it's benefited all of us. Okay. Anyway, as we're going through our code review process, or as our team discussions, we've been encouraged and blessed by the idea of having much more technical dialogue amongst our group. We're switching over from a waterfall process into an agile development process, which is also encouraging communications really well amongst our group. As we go through these discussions, we're talking and we're constantly refining what we consider our standards and what we're looking for. So, excuse me, as we're going through those discussions, we're looking for ways to say, hey, these are things that we are always asking for. Is there any way we could dynamically assist ourselves, or is there a utility that we could create to help promote this end result that we're certainly desiring? All right? And so we're looking for repetitive actions. Then, hey, if we are able to do that, go out and we're going to go create that utility. Like I said, I have an example of one here. Actually, it was spurred on by Nancy several years ago, and I finally got around to creating it. And it was almost a joy to document my front panel. The first 3 hours of documentation was fun. So we'll talk about that though. And we do lean heavily on the VI Analyzer. Again, we can argue the different levels of rigor for at the low level or the user interface, different appropriate tests that we're running on it. But we are leveraging that. And I have found for myself that once I started using the VI Analyzer, at first I argued that many of the tests were not particularly good because my style wasn't fitting that. And you know what? I've seen LabVIEW, I've seen National Instruments code, and if they're not willing to run VI Analyzer, why should I? All those arguments. That's a little personal jab, sorry.
Actually, last year, as the code was remarkably improved. In
2013, we actually pulled all of the examples out. And everything had to pass VI Analyzer, and Darren was the gatekeeper. And the funny part is Brian Powell still found one example VI somewhere that really needed some more work, and he uses it in a code review example. But yeah.
But the bottom line, though, and obviously NI is a good example of leveraging this to improve themselves. I did that as well, and I found that I started to adhere to some of the suggestions through VI Analyzer. As I started to develop and knowing what the tests were going to be at the end, the code I was generating actually became much more consistent, and the error lines that we were talking about hopefully are no longer there, where I just pass it through and say, this code will never generate an error. It's good. Anyway, so I have an objective then to actually beat the analyzer as I'm developing code. There's some definite tests that I ignore still today, but the majority of the ones that I have now refined down to a key set, I try to beat as I'm doing my development, and I found that it has actually improved the readability and the maintainability of my code. So I do encourage that. And then the utilities, and we're going to have a good example of a presentation a little later. At all stages of development, we have this opportunity. How many of you have spent a considerable amount of time, and this is, I'm going to get into the opportunity that I found. How many of you have spent a considerable amount of time to write very thick user manual that has never been opened, right? Yeah, that's a good time. I mean, hey, that's good stuff. So the idea of saying it's an administrative control, this is how the software is supposed to work. Just read page 47 and you'll see the steps I want you to take. Is actually, unfortunately, not going to fly anymore. So the idea of the opportunity that I found is if we can build all of that into our user interfaces and creating intuitive user interfaces, well-documented processes that are documented right there for the user, we have at least a chance that they'll direct the code the way we were hoping that they would. And then with all the corner cases, even if they don't, hopefully we catch that. So anyway, the opportunity that I first, that was identified, and actually Nancy, again, gets credit for saying this about 3 years ago to us. She had talked about, well, I have this little tool I made. It's just a dirty little utility that goes and grabs all the documentation off of the front panel, each object, and brings it out so I can just write the documentation to each object and push it back into the VI. It's a much quicker process. So I said, well, that's fantastic, Nancy, but I like the old style of you right-click, show the documentation, cut, triple-click, cut, go, close that, open the next one, paste, modify. So there was two techniques there. I finally decided, let's get on to the next one. And then also, second grade teachers, as it turns out, are not super proficient at grammar and spelling. That's why I was actually pretty successful there, but not so much here, okay? I like the same idea of Jim's. As soon as it gets to the end user, to the customer, boy, if Jim hasn't caught my spelling mistakes and made fun of me for it, they certainly will. So I said, well, how did I build into this utility of some way to export it out to Word and do some spell checking? So again, this is an example of an opportunity. I said, I could dynamically solve this problem and create a utility to improve my end result with the idea of pushing towards this whole under the globe of professional software, okay?
Quick question just for the group. Does anybody know of a way to tie spell check into LabVIEW natively? I was looking at that the other day. This is the closest I can come up with, is you export to something that's got spell check built in.
Have you found a way to go to Word and pull it back in dynamically? Yeah.
Yeah, Analyzer has spell check, but not
the
natively.
Analyzer does, yeah. That's good, but the grammar also was necessary for this. So
right.
Anyway, but it just was an idea. You know, the end result is also that I get out of it a document, a fairly fair document for helping me with my 47-page user manual.
Are you going to package that up and sell it to Chinese people or
what's that?
Japanese people writing software for us? You're going to package that up and sell it to the foreigners that are...
Okay, main customer is the U.S. government. No, I don't even mention the Chinese.
We'll leave
that one up to you. We get in severe trouble even talking about that.
Anyway, so I just wanted to
selling stuff to the Chinese has bad connotations in our business.
That's where the money is.
So step one was to identify the problem. Step two was to create the utility to resolve, to assist in this dynamic problem. And so I just wanted to demonstrate that real quick. Okay, so this is that same VI. And just quickly show you the block diagram. All it's doing is going and based upon the reference, this little traverse, the VI, you'll get a little bit more detail on that in a moment. In essence, what this is doing, pulling off the front panel controls the reference to every control off the front panel. The cool thing about this VI here is that it jumps into clusters, pulls each one of the individual references of objects within the cluster, and so on and so forth. Okay, anyway, go get all the references, just determine their class name. This is just for the utility again, but you'll see the similarities in when I actually demonstrate the test that I go and run against this as well. Pull it in there, populate my front panel, allow the user to go and change the descriptions, populate it, push it back out to the VI. So let's go ahead and see that one working.
What's the class name input on your traverse reference? Is it just GObject or control or what?
The class, I'm sorry, let me get back to It's control, I believe, is the thinker. Hello?
Don't mind me. Didn't.
This guy here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's
Pull it more to the, yeah.
control, front panel controls. Okay. Anyway, I had this little calibration routine. If I pull in its top level, sorry for that, I'll get it straightened up on the top level up there in a moment. All I'm doing is actually opening up a front panel of a VI. And I said, well, as I'm doing the documentation, I have multiple monitors, so this works a little bit better on that. But at the same time, I said, okay, if I'm going to be writing descriptions, I want to see the context I'm writing against. So open the front panel and go through and say, all right, this is what I'm actually documenting. This VI's front panel. Pretty hard to see because it's collapsed, sorry. Never mind, we'll go right straight back to this guy. No,
It's down there.
it is
Yeah.
down here. Okay. How the heck do I
Minimize
change
it.
it? There it is. Okay. The idea for this test was, okay, you have a bunch of front panel objects, and also pulled in the VI description because that's one of the other tests in the VI Analyzer is going to come through and say, have you described what the VI's intention is for supportability for everyone else? So be it. All right. Pull in each front panel object, and it's going to go through and determine if the descriptions are done. And all I'm doing for that in this particular case is there anything written in that description? Okay. So, yeah.
Have you made this utility available for download on NI's website?
I have not. You're more than welcome to grab it though. And I'm also
If
good.
you post it, we will come.
Sounds great. Sounds great. At any rate, so the idea is, all right, I've done all my documentation at this point. Until I write it back to the VI, I don't want to see that it's done. So it's an end-to-end thing saying, hey, it's already been populated back there. And at this point, like I said, I just want to be able to export it out to Word, and hopefully this will show up okay for you. There. Again, all I'm doing here is I'm just putting a description over in this column here, and I just can quickly scroll through and determine that do I have any red or green things that I need to fix in Word. I have, again, found the way to get it dynamically pulled back in. That would be a real joy there for sure.
Could you just use the left-hand column there as an index into all of your control references? Right? As long as you do it in one session.
Pulling it from Word back in? How do you pull it from the...
Oh, how do you read the document?
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah, no, it is actually pushing it back up to my panel. Is that... Maybe there's...
I hear what you're saying, you could.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
So the problem is, yeah, so if I found a spelling error here, I correct it here, then I have to copy it and paste it back into my utility.
Got it.
And then push it back to the...
What about exporting this to Excel?
Exactly.
Doing
Yeah,
your
that's my
spell
thought.
you'll spell check in Excel, and then reading the Excel file back in.
Yeah,
and
easy
then
to go get.
publishing.
Oh, fantastic!
Because Excel is good formatting.
Yeah, okay.
Does Excel
Leveraging the same grammar and spell check.
I don't know about grammar, but it does have spell.
Oh, boy. Probably, but I wouldn't bet
The
on it.
biggest problem we're finding is grammar. My basic training is a bachelor's in electrical engineering. I can write stuff and no one else can read it. Spell checker doesn't catch it because they're all English words. The grammar checker in Word is actually pretty valuable. I hate to lose that.
Yeah. You certainly could pull in the formatting though, just parse it back out from Word though.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, Nick.
I love the export to Word for the grammar check, but I'm surprised you don't have tooltips as part of one of the checks up here.
Well, that would be a simple addition, right?
I'm just wondering why tooltips you don't think are very viable.
Well, as long as you could turn them off, I like them, the front panel, right? Because I do see sometimes when the tooltips, if they're permanent, boy, they clutter. But yes, we actually do leverage them, and it would just be a matter of adding that. Because I already have the controls reference there. Give me your tooltip as well. So the back and forth would be simple there.
I love tooltips.
Excel doesn't appear to have a grammar check. It's not just a spell check.
Thank you, Iggy.
What about a table in Word?
Could you pull it back in?
So that is a table though.
Yeah, it looks like a
Yeah.
table.
So why couldn't you index it just like, I don't know enough about Word and then.
That's a great question to this group, this community. You're illustrating why we're here today. Is if I can leverage you guys to figure out how to pull it back in from Word after it's been spell checked. That would be awesome.
There's a toolkit that does interaction with Word.
Right, and you can also use .NET to automate.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Go straight to their API, and especially if you don't put anything but that table in there, and then you go to the API, the Word API, and say, give me everything in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we have a one-to-one relationship there still because we're using the references. That's great. Okay, thank you. All right, so create the utility, have the community modify the utility, and then leverage the utility. And then socialize it back to the same team that just corrected it. That's good. But that's the whole purpose of community, right? So that's great. That's a great illustration. At any rate, so then again, I went out and tested it, and again, for me, I got all giddy. The first 2 hours of my documentation, 8-hour documentation day, was actually enjoyable, seeing it work. And then it got like that mundane. But we have another tool, the other side of this. So this is what I say in the bookending. We found an opportunity to say I can create a little utility that's going to improve my consistency and the end user experience. It's going to make that consistent from one tester to the next. It's also going to ensure that I have not overlooked a small nuance, right? The utility can do a much better job than I can with the Control H and hovering over each object on my front panel. Okay, so for those of you who have not begun leveraging the VI Analyzer, I'm going to just step through, I'm not going to go through VI Analyzer, that's something I'm certain you've all been exposed to at some level. But for those of you who have already been using it, have you created a custom test yet? Okay, good. That's fantastic. Again, from last summit, Darren gave a specific presentation at the breakout session about, hey, this is what I intended for you guys to do as a community. I intended to make this plugin architecture, and here's my thoughts on it, and I've made it in such a way that, in fact, he's done a very good job, NI's website has done a very good job of illustrating how I have, how to create custom tests. Right? So for this particular case, I said, well, I've determined that it's necessary for me to ensure that my front panels are documented. So I'm going to create a test so that not only myself, but also my group and the community are able to determine, did I complete my documentation? All right, so VI Analyzer, the first thing is to come into the VI Analyzer. I'm going to create a new test. Now, as you're doing this, I'll show a slide that already shows the community-generated VI tests, VI Analyzer tests. Recommendation would be, first of all, look through the currently available native tests, and then look at the community to say, okay, this is what I'm attempting to do. Is there anything that already covers it? If there's not, this is exactly what the intent was of this architecture. All right, so as you say create a test, it comes up with this dialog to say, go ahead and name the test and give it a description. This description that you're giving it is what's going to pop up in the VI Analyzer as it's run. Okay? All right, so, and then I went ahead and said create our next. You have an option between a VI-driven or global-driven test. This one is global-driven. And so we can look at a lot of documentation to help you determine which one it is. From what I've seen thus far, it looks like this is going to be perfectly sufficient for what I'm attempting to do here. Okay? All right, so once you've created the test, what is actually created is a little LLB. And this LLB is going into the LabVIEW data folder under VI Analyzer tests. Okay? So in my particular case, that's my documents, LabVIEW data, VI Analyzer tests. And then you'll see a bunch of different LLBs in there. In fact, I only have one right now, but if you went to the community and grabbed some, if you just put them there, the VI Analyzer is going to look at that each time it's launched to find new tests. All right? In this particular case, a driven one, globally driven one, There's one VI that's created, and that's the actual test code that you're going to be writing, right? And then there's two global pages. One of them is for configuration, and then one of them is for targeting. So if you wanted the scope of your test to have multiple targets, being front panel and block diagram, or with this particular case, the example's not a good example of that. I only needed the front panel, but anyway, we'll look at those two things real quick. I'm only leveraging the front panel and controls. Okay? Again, you guys are more than welcome to this presentation today, and it has these links in it that really I've found very helpful as I was going through it. Oh, and sorry, the other global page is for the configuration. Okay. So this is what this is the global page for the configuration. This is what it looks like by default when you first created the test. Gives you a nice description of what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to go out and populate this particular region with exactly what you want it to have in terms of globals. These globals translate straight into your code. Okay, you'll see that in the next page. All right. No questions? Okay. All right. Sorry. Then you're gonna. This is by default what you get up with. What comes up in the LLB. This is where you're actually going to do your coding of the actual dynamic test. All that it brings in is the VI reference. So as the VI analyzer goes through all of the defined VIs or controls, it's going to pull in all of those. Reference to the specific item under test. And then it has the results data coming out of it. In this particular case, or in all cases, the results data, if it's an empty array, that means everything has passed. So you're only populating that with failures. So let me show you how I ended up doing that. I ignored the third global because my scope, my target scope was only the front panel controls. The other global page is an array of clusters that have the target and the class name associated with it. So you could go through an array, through a for loop and look at multiple scopes. Sorry, diversion. Anyway, this is all I was doing. So I decided that this test was first, most importantly, for the end user experience, if I wanted to limit it to only VIs that have a front panel that pops up to the end user. That's the first and most important scope of this test. And I don't have to limit it to that, but if that's my main reason for testing someone else's code during a code review, then I'm going to make sure that the user experience is complete. So that's the one button, the one configuration button I've decided to put in is, hey, if it's end user facing, all right, I want to make sure that all of those controls are populated with the description. And if that's false, and during configuration, it looks at all of the VIs you've selected to test against. So that's all that's happening right here. All right, I have that reference that we came with the template. Right, go in here, go through that VI's reference and get the references to all of the front panel controls, items on the control, on the front panel, excuse me. And then very similarly, just go through it. Hey, if it has an empty description or not, that's what's my flag. Notice, again, the only time is if this is an empty string, that's the only time I'm appending this cluster back to my results data. So I'm only putting failures back out to the results. Okay, test your test, nothing worse than saying, Jim, would you look at this, and it bombs out. So go ahead and test your test, and let me go ahead and do that real quick. All right. Sorry. This is very embarrassing. I'm not going to run it on this one because my documentation wizard is not fully documented. Okay, I'll go ahead and run it. Okay, so pulling up the VI analyzer, and please help me if I'm pulling it off the panel here. When you create a custom test to there, the VI analyzer interface, I'm going to go ahead and analyze the current VI, has a place for them to be populated. These user-specified tests are coming straight out of that LabVIEW data folder within my documents. Okay? So for this case, I don't want to actually show you all of the errors. I just want to look at the ones that failed. Oops, sorry. And I'm only checking the front panel object descriptions. That's the test that I just created. Okay, using that traverse tool, also with the references coming back to it, says, hey, this is the results window for my VI analyzers, and it says this particular test failed. It had 5 failures, which, again, slightly embarrassing. Anyway, as I'm toggling between the VI analyzer results window, this panel object needs a description, right? And I didn't change it, so by default it just has the 5 maximum errors. You could also modify that. And again, all these errors are just the populated elements within that results cluster of the test. Okay?
So can you describe again what the global was at the beginning of your test? Where did that global get set? What is the significance of it?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Okay. Let me go ahead and open up this test that I'm actually running. Before I do that, I'll show you those three different VIs that come up. Any questions about the process that I went through up to this point? Says, okay, let me get on to that one then. All right. Whoops. All right. Okay. Oh boy, that's not working, is it? So LabVIEW data, VI analyzer tests. Here's the LLB that it actually created when I created this test. And that global page, I think this is, I know what you're asking about. This guy? Okay, so this guy gets related to the front panel. Maybe there's a better way of doing this. Into my test, it's just a global page here. When you configure the VI analyzer test, let me show you that real quick. I'm going to analyze this VI. Not sure if I've done that yet or not. But okay, never mind. We're going to go into this. And just for this, what that ends up translated to is right here.
Oh, okay.
All right. So the parameters for your specific tests get put into that global page, and they translate straight over here. And that's why he has that area defined on it. And well documented. Hey, it's a plugin, or it's got to be able to fit in this region. And I thought that was real clever the way he's done it. You know. And so in essence, now the tester, the user could say, hey, go and run it only on front-facing, user-facing front panels. Oh boy. I'm running the test on the test, and
You ran all the tests.
crackers. Hey. Okay, thank you. At any rate, it did not fail my user test because this front panel is not being made visible. So, yes.
So that results indicator that gets eventually fed to the analyzer, what's the format? Is it a type def? Is it?
Let me show you that. It's just right here, and it's just yes, it is a type def. Absolutely, because it has to plug back in, right? And all it is the result message. So I just had a.
Yeah, you gotta scroll over a little.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's so intuitive. Okay, that might make it more intuitive. All it is the results message and the reference index back to that item. And so this reference index comes off of that control, so that when you click on it, whoop, highlights it on the front panel. And it's very valuable to me. So that's the only format. And you are constrained to that. Obviously, we're building a plugin to that VI analyzer architecture. Okay. Any other questions?
I'm not sure how it knows what to do with the reference index because his test framework doesn't know that you're asking for all controls in the panel. So what does the reference index actually mean to him? You know?
Yeah, I didn't see how that is actually working either until I traversed, and when I was using the traverse, I told you we were talking about that.
But I'm saying his test doesn't require to use traverse. So you could have just pulled out control Y and called that reference 0.
When I did this first, I didn't realize there was a traverse, so I was just trying to go to the objects and then just find the front panel. I was going through all of that. And as I double-clicked on the failed results, I think he must be using that back into his architecture, assuming that, because it did not highlight the controls when I just fed it references. So I'm sorry, but I'm not exactly sure.
Sounds like there's some assumptions built in, maybe. But.
Possibly so, yeah. But as soon as it did start highlighting the failures and it went back to that specific controls, these guys had to suffer a little celebration dance out of it. It looks professional. Anyway.
Hey, Robert?
Yes.
Definitely, you know, and after this, maybe during the break, let's put together kind of our list of questions where we don't know exactly what's going on behind the scenes, because David Ladisetta, who is very involved with our VI Tools Network, is putting together a presentation for Developer Days. Okay. And so he's going to kind of talk about, you know, I think he's going to include adding VI Analyzer tests or something like that. So whatever under the hood stuff is unclear, let's make sure that he's going to clarify it.
That's a great comment. And also, I did get a correspondence with Darren. He said he's going to be revamping all of the VI Analyzer templates.
Mm-hmm.
So creating a new test, he's revamping it for the next version, which should make it much more intuitive.
So that will be for 2014 then?
Yeah, I believe
okay.
so.
Okay.
Now, that also lends back to another comment I had to make, was that I went to the resources at ni.com looking at custom tests that had already been generated to try to leverage. I have a template, it has the VI reference, and it has this output. Now what? So my point in that thing was that that comment is leveraging what's already out there and taking it and applying, tweaking it to your own application is very valuable. And so I went to this next slide. I'm going to show you the resources. Right here, if you go to this is a community VI Analyzer test that the community has already generated and pushed back out to ni.com. And this test potentially, with some enhancements from this group, might be able to make it up to this list. But taking one of those and looking at the way they're leveraging it, in particular if they're traversing multiple things, I'm fairly new at that, and so I'm interested in how they're looking at different objects throughout the environment. All right, so again, the bottom line, go to ni.com and leverage as best you can. I found that they did a very good job of documenting how to do custom tests in VI Analyzer. The bigger point of what I was trying to illustrate with all of this is the whole idea of bookending, saying finding opportunities to create dynamic utilities. The end result of those dynamic utilities are you're leveraging those to ensure consistency and professional development. And so I was hoping that we might have a discussion at this point for other opportunities you might have found, and in particular if you already have some utilities that you say, hey, this is why we've done this one, that would be fantastic. And then also, hey, if this is a standard that you're pushing and you found a utility to do it, is there a way to dynamically test that? Can we test it? You say, hey, I'm ensuring that I've conformed to what I said is my standard through the VI Analyzer custom tests. And then what other tests, even without the utilities, can be generated? Pretty much, that's where I end and you guys take off.
Question, so when you started using this, because I don't use it, did you say, okay, from this point on, now that we've started using VI Analyzer, we're going to use it? Or did you kind of go back into old stuff? Or if you updated something in the old code, did you wait, how did you define that?
Yeah, like I said, at first when I started using VI Analyzer, I got very frustrated with it because I had a very an idea that I was doing very consistent code generation already. And so for me to break that mold within myself, it took a little bit to say, well, maybe this VI Analyzer thing, its suggestions, though I don't 100% agree, maybe it has a valid point. And so it took me a while to actually lean upon it. And I'll admit, I don't always lean on the VI Analyzer as much as perhaps I could. As we get more and more, as a department, we get more and more standardized in terms of code reviews. That's certainly at this point. I've gotten to the point over years, to try to answer your question. Over years, I've gotten to the point now where I will at least run it to just ensure that I didn't miss something simple, right? I know well enough now to understand when the VI analyzer complains about something, I can either say, yes, I should fix that, or, you know what, there's a valid reason why I'm doing it this way, I don't need VI analyzers. Much like the results of a code review, I don't need to do that just because the VI analyzer told me to do it. So I guess I don't know if I've even answered your question at all. I would say it's been an evolution of a relationship between me and VI Analyzer over several years to get to the point, like I said, at this point I'm trying to beat the analyzer as I'm developing code because I know what it's looking for, and I know in particular what it's looking for that I also agree is important. Hey, I don't want wire bends if I can avoid them, so I'm going to try to beat it. In that sense.
Yep.
I hope that helps.
The other thing I'd add to that is that you can save your configuration of the tests. So
yes.
In our source code control, we have a VI analyzer configuration that we use for peer reviews. And it's kind of, I wish we'd do a better job at it, but intended to be an iterative process amongst the team to agree on, hey, we're going to allow more than 100 nodes in the VI or whatever. It's got all these little rules throughout all the tests that you can customize to make it more flexible. And some of you just ignore and don't worry about it,
Right.
And you save that configuration, and that becomes your agreed, set of tests for going into a peer review.
Well, and then one of the conversations we were having last night was peer reviews can be, if they're design reviews and not structured, can get kind of contentious. Like, Jason, I don't like your code. Tim, there's something I don't like about yours.
Yeah.
And so it becomes very finger pointing, and this takes the finger pointing away from people to people. It's now VI Analyzer, which is non-human. We can hate VI Analyzer.
It's nice to have the common VI Analyzer.
Yeah.
Well, and I do want to, one of the things that is difficult, during that discussion last night, we did talk about peer reviews, and this lends right into it about the idea of, like I said, when I first started using VI Analyzer, and most certainly we've had some great discussions about, hey, you should be doing it this way. No, this is the way it's right. Well, it turns out the VI Analyzer's viewpoint and my viewpoint, Jim's viewpoint and my viewpoint, though different, both may be right and both have merit. So the idea of adjusting that attitude internally for myself to say, okay, I'm going to leverage Jim's expertise to make me a better programmer. I'm going to look at what Darren says in some cases, or my own custom tests, and improve my programming. That attitude change and that perspective change has greatly benefited me in terms of peer review and taking truly intended as constructive criticism and improving because of it. So,
question for everyone: how to manage conflicts in review or development?
Go.
Well, when we do a peer review, we actually classify the issues in 3 ways. Quality issue, if it doesn't meet a functional requirement. Efficiency issue, if you can do something a little quicker but still get to the ends. And then cosmetic issue, which the VI Analyzer will find with wire bends and such, or things underneath structures. So we'll classify them, and like what Jim said, we won't try to fix the code there during the code review. And then we, depending on timing and deadlines, forget about the cosmetic fixes and the efficiency of the fixes, but definitely deal with the quality fixes.
But basically, my question was if two people have very different view how to program and fight with each other, and the project goes anywhere, what to do with this situation?
The CLA is always right.
That comes from a CLD, so I mean.
There's 2 things that I would say could leverage that. Number one, I'm coaching junior wrestling, so that usually helps in conflicts. Jim's a bit more aggressive than the 8-year-olds. No, but more important than that is if you can demonstrate that the code, your methodology. I mean, you have methods for benchmarking, for checking for memory leaks, all of that. That would be a strong argument towards, hey, mine is just as good. Look at the benchmark of what the code I've generated has done. So scientifically, probably better than the brute force method. I don't know if that answers or it helps.
I'm going to toss out, if you're in a review, keep in mind, everybody codes a little differently. Gee, I understand you don't want to have lines underneath VIs or things like that. Let it happen. Learn what they're doing. You might embed it into your own work later if it works out to be a good idea, but don't be too critical. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then also the idea of the more you do code reviews as a community, peer reviews, the more the easier they become, because it's not a personal attack. Because guess what? I'm gonna attack your code today, and I'm looking at saying, well, I didn't like that wild shirt you had on, so here's why your code doesn't work. Tomorrow you get to do the same thing back to me, whatever. But I do think, I say, embracing that idea of it's improving both the reviewee and the reviewer. Difficult to get to in some environments.
And I would think that everything you're doing here with the VI analyzer is something you do before you walk into the code review.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, this is
well, like I said, right now,
allow you to walk in there and say, gee, all this stupid stuff has already been taken care of. I'm hoping you guys don't see any of it.
Right.
I fixed that misspelling. I fixed.
Yeah, I did the very best I could to present you something that I think is end related. And the reason why I can't see it anymore is because I'm right here. You know, give me this perspective before the customer gives me this perspective, right? Absolutely. So,
Robert, I just wanted to say, I thought the idea of writing your own tool to help you do documentation is just fantastic, because it's so tedious to do documentation, and I'm ashamed that it never thought of me to, you know,
thank you, Nancy. Indeed.
Well, we talked about this and I'm sure it's somewhere in the current advanced course, but. Because there was a whole section, and I think it's still in there, on just the project API itself, and just automating just different things in your software development process. And the whole thing is, if you find yourself clicking, 1, 2, 3, and you do it over again, 1, 2, 3, and then the third time you do it, and there's a story behind this, I think too, by then you should be automating it. So anytime we're doing something more than 2 or 3 times, it's time to automate.
Robert, thank you for that comment. The idea is looking intentionally for those opportunities, and saying, well, there has to be something I can do. Come on, I'm a LabVIEW guy. Can I leverage it? As I said last night, is there any way we could use LabVIEW to write our documentation? Well, then do.
Well, see, but it helps knowing about the community pages and knowing that those examples are already there, because then we have a model to go by. So.
Oh, okay, guys. Actually, I'm done, but I thank you very much for your attention and for having me here. It's great. Right on.
All right, so there's